for a lot of writers, I think, until they get some of those, I know you can't see my quote fingers here, but until you get some of those quote unquote business pieces in place, a formal website, an author website, different pages, actual published book, they don't see it as a business. They don't see it as real. And yeah, I think it absolutely changes the mindset, because then you're like, okay, I'm out there. People can find me. People can see me. They can see what I'm doing.
Welcome to the Author Like a Boss podcast, the podcast for indie authors who want to improve their writing, up-level their marketing, make money with their books, and have fun doing it. Now, onto the show with your host, ALAB Barnard.
Hey boss, if you are starting on your author journey but are nervous about marketing, then I've got something special for you. I've just released a book called Start Marketing Your Book. In it, I share fundamental marketing principles and simple, actionable steps that you can take right now. For less than a cup of coffee, you could actually have everything you need to start selling more books. To buy the book, go to authorlikeaboss.com/start marketing. Hello, everyone. Hello, author bosses. We are here today with the amazing and lovely Stacy Sowers. She was born and raised in the Appalachian foothills of West Virginia. Stacy became a book lover at an early age after reading an original 1970s printing of E.B. White's Trumpet of the Swan, which she still has her ragged, dog-eared copy. When she read that, she knew she wanted to write. After a 20-year career in technology focused on programming, web development, and teaching tech, she dove into the deep end of the indie author pool and hasn't looked back. Stacy's here. She also writes under Morgan Shaw, but I know her as Stacy. Stacy, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Oh, you can tell she's from the Appalachian foothills because she has a sweet accent.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay, Stacy. So can you just jump right in and tell us a little bit about yourself and your author journey?
Yeah, absolutely. My author journey, it started a little bit later in life, even though I knew from a real early age that I wanted to write. Like a lot of people, I think I wanted to be an author. I wanted to write that book. But of course, they fall into the mindset where, being a writer is just it's not practical. And it's not a, quote unquote, real job. And especially being from where I'm from, here in West Virginia, which has always been a more economically, backwards kind of place, country or, success, it means a real job. Okay. And from West Virginia, that means a couple different things. That means coal mines or, if you go up to the northern part of the state, there's some technology there. But for me, a lot of that wasn't practical. Even though I come from a coal mining family, that was never going to be my job, preferably. But I went in, I fell into the trap of it not being practical. So when computers first started actually coming out, I'm going to date myself here a little bit. My first computer still used a cassette tape to save things. And I kind of fell in love with technology and computers. And so that was my lot in life for quite a few years. Now I've written all my life, but, and it's always been my passion to do that. But I didn't actually start publishing until my 40s. But I'm a firm believer that everything happens exactly as it's meant to and in the time that it's meant to happen. So I always knew when I started it that I wanted to be able to give back to other writers and authors and help others along the way, because I love to teach. And it just made sense that, bringing that tech experience with me, it was a perfect fit. So,
yeah. So you guys, just to be really upfront, Stacy and I have written and are releasing a book, Build Your Author Website, together, because I ran into Stacy and I was like, oh my gosh, she's an indie author and she has 20 years experience in the tech and web development. Like, that's what she's done for her profession. And so we have written this book together. So just, up front. But I wanted to ask you, Stacy, because I totally agree with you on the, like, it happened to me too. Not that I agree that it's right, but it happened to me too, that I was like, oh, that's not responsible or reasonable to go after that creative dream right?
Yes.
Like
Exactly.
it's not safe. It's not a real job. It was never considered a real job in my mind to do something creative. So what had you, put that aside though, because now you're writing books. So what happened?
Oh gosh, corporate 9 to 5.
Okay.
I've done the whole corporate 9 to 5 grind for, well, pretty much since I was about 18, a little bit before actually. And I've worked for companies from New York City to Utah and back again, and some really large corporations, American Express, General Electric, all over the place. And some of them I absolutely loved. And some of them in the later years made me decide I never wanted to spend another day in the corporate 9 to 5 grind. It actually is a lot more stress than what people realize, I think, in the technology industry. Not only because it's so competitive, but it's constantly changing. So it's a constant balance between actually doing the work and staying on top of what's coming next. So, not only are you a technology professional, you're basically a professional student, which I love on one hand because I love learning, but it does become almost like having 2 full-time jobs together. And, a couple years ago, my health actually started taking a couple little dips, and it made it more difficult to keep up with that. And and plus hitting my 40s, and as a woman, when you hit your 40s, that's probably a whole other podcast. But as a woman, when you hit your 40s, things start changing your perspective a little bit on things, and you start really examining parts of your life. And so when I was examining some of those parts of my life, I was like, you know what? That's something I've always wanted to do. It's something I've always done, but have never truly actually done it. And I'm not getting any younger. So here we go. And it was literally that once it occurred to me, and once I put a little bit of thought of it, the decision was that easy. It was a matter of, you know what? I'm leaving something that doesn't serve me anymore to do something that I've always wanted to do that I dearly love. So it was a pretty easy decision.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful because I just turned 38, which is not 40s, but it's as I've gotten further and further from my 20s, let's say,
Yes.
I realized that I don't care as much about what other people think I should be doing.
Yeah.
And I care more about what I really want to do. And every year that gets, that it's like a scale, like when I was in my 20s, it was like I cared so much about what I was supposed to be doing. And that was what I was supposed to be doing was essentially what other people were telling me to do.
Yes, exactly.
Other people's expectations of me. And every year that passes, that side of the scale gets lighter, and the scale of, like the side of I care about what I want to do gets heavier. And I'm like, this is, yeah.
Yes.
Plus, I never really liked other people telling me what to do, especially because like I'm really smart. Like people don't, I'm bubbly. And so a lot of people don't, if you're bubbly, that means you are not also smart, but I'm really smart. And so I was like, these other people are telling me what to do and I could do it better.
Exactly. Yes.
But I can't because they're my boss. I have to do it their way. Okay.
Yeah.
So I love that you're like, hey, my health is happening. My health I'm having issues with my health. I'm getting to that age and I don't want to do that anymore. I want to go for what's truly meaningful for me. And I love that that's a combo now of indie authoring. So you're writing like you've always wanted to write, but you're also taking your expertise. So you aren't just like throwing those 20 years of work and experience away.
Exactly. Yes.
But you're like, hey, I'm passionate about writing. I'm passionate about writers. I have this experience that a lot of people have a challenge with. Like a lot of people are really challenged, especially writers, because they're creatives and they have a real challenge with billing the website and the tech side. So I love that you've taken that and you're like, hey, I don't have to throw that experience away to be creative. I can take it.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Well, plus, I mean, really, when you get right down to it, writers are better served by writing, not by spending time trying to learn a bunch of tech that they really don't care about anyway.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. But you know me, so let's talk about this a little bit because I want to talk about websites. I want to talk about, because we just wrote a book together. And this is something I've also built websites in my life because I lived in the Silicon Valley. I moved to the Silicon Valley, you guys, from New York. I had been a teacher in New York. I moved to the Silicon Valley and I was like, oh my gosh, I don't speak geek. So I right away, I went out and I bought like the how to write each. It was like I went and bought a book about how to write HTML code and build your own and CSS and build your own website. Because I was like, okay, everybody here knows how to do this. I need to know at least the basics.
Yeah.
So then I built my own little baby website. And it was really cute. And then I dated somebody who was like, you should just find WordPress. And I was like, oh, WordPress.
I guess.
Which we will go into later. But but I have my own experience then. I also went and made friends with people who watched the, Star Trek Next Generation. And they were like, you don't know it? And I was like, I've never watched it. And they were like, oh my gosh. So now I have many times.
Yeah.
But that started in the Silicon Valley with those good friends. Okay.
Yeah. Well, you can't get your geek flag, your little geek badge until you watch that.
Right.
From the beginning. So
right. So let's talk about author websites. So what do you think? Let's just start with an overall general thing. So what do you think is the most important? Why do you think it's important for people to have an author website, for authors to have one?
Oh, absolutely. Mainly because all the other platforms that we as authors use, whether it's Amazon or Kobo or Nook or iBooks or Facebook or Twitter, any of those, we don't have any control over any facet of any of those sites. None, not at all. At any point in time, and a lot of us have run into this, Facebook, Twitter, Amazon, they can change the rules. They can change the algorithms. They can make it to where we're not getting seen, where it's harder to reach our readers, even our friends. So having an author website is, it seems kind of old school in modern technology, email lists and websites, but it truly is the backbone of what your business should be, because that's something that an author has complete control over. They own that. They get to make the rules on how it works and how it reaches their readers. That's why author websites and incorporating email lists into your author websites are so, it's so critically important, because if Facebook and the social medias and all those close up shop tomorrow, which, they're not going to, but they could always change the rules. But if they did, if you have, your author website, people can still find you. They can still get to you. And if you have your email list incorporated into your author website, you can still get back to them. And that's critical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're bringing up a really important point about the email list and author website combo. But I also think it's a good important point to say, here's something that I found as I'm doing these interviews is that people, if you have an author website, it's like and I think you came up with this analogy, it's the hub.
Yes.
So when you're talking with people, when you're interacting with people, rather than being like, hey, here's this, here, like, oh, where can I find you? You're like, oh, on Facebook or Twitter and Instagram or and you overwhelm people really easily with that. But if you have an author website,
exactly,
you can just say,
yep.
Oh, well, you can go to, morganshaw.com
and then find everything else from there.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Find my books, find my social media, find my newsletter, find everything there. It's a really easy. If you guys are making business cards, I wanted to ask you, do you think it helps with mindset to have an author website?
Absolutely. Yeah, because a lot of writers, and myself included, that decision to start writing for me and actually publishing was an easy one. But hitting publish on the first book and actually being able to, in my mind, there was a difference between being a writer and being an author. I wasn't an author until I had a published book. In my mind, that's just how I differentiated that. And for a lot of writers, I think, until they get some of those, I know you can't see my quote fingers here, but until you get some of those quote unquote business pieces in place, a formal website, an author website, different pages, actual published book, they don't see it as a business. They don't see it as real. And yeah, I think it absolutely changes the mindset, because then you're like, okay, I'm out there. People can find me. People can see me. They can see what I'm doing. So at that point, your mindset does shift a little bit, because you're like, okay, it's out there now. I have to actually do this thing. So yeah, I think it absolutely affects the mindset.
I think so too. I think you can use what you just said. If you are having a hard time owning that professional author persona, or owning that in yourself of being an author instead of a writer, or being, or hobby writing instead of professional writing. Like if you're looking to make that jump to being professional, I think building your author website is a really good tool to say, to go forward on that. And I always hesitate to say that kind of stuff because I also don't want you to procrastinate on the writing. Like finish your books, finish them, and publish them. But
the website's definitely a tool, but it's a very powerful tool. I mean, can you imagine, I don't know, Walmart or Procter and Gamble not having a website?
Right.
A big business, a real quote unquote business, would never not have a website. And it's the same with us authors. It really does affect the mindset of it, and the mindset of the readers too.
Yes. Yeah, it does. And so I want to move into, so we're talking about the readers and your website. So when you have, let's say you have an author website, what do you have on there to appeal to the readers? Like, because that's I think a lot of people's questions beyond just the technology part. It's like, what the heck would I even put on there besides like my books and about me and then what?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's a huge problem with, because, we're writers, but when you get to your website and gosh forbid having to actually write about yourself, it gets kind of tough. And it does. I mean, it's, and I think a lot of us overcomplicate it also, which is probably part of that whole mindset part. But really, if you think about it, if you're writing, like for myself, I write in a fantasy genre, which, most people who write in a particular genre do so because they love that genre. And your readers are the same. They love that genre. Otherwise, they wouldn't be your reader. So you already have this whole common set of things that you have in common that you both love. So really, it's just a matter of kind of, expanding on that a little bit. It doesn't always have to be about selling the books. It can be about, oh my gosh, did you guys see the most recent, Star Trek or, Lord of the Rings thing that just came out, or whatever it might be. Which I wish there was more Lord of the Rings stuff coming out, but apparently there is on Amazon. Whole other podcast. That's a different. I'm getting into my geekness there, but really, it's about relationship building. And I know that writers hear that all the time, but it really is. After you get it out of your head that you're trying to sell somebody, just completely get that out of your head. You're not trying to sell anybody something. You're trying to connect with those people who already love what you do. Mm-hmm. Once you build that relationship with them, the rest is cake.
Mm-hmm. So what do you put on your author website to build that relationship? And you did give an example of if you love Star Trek, they love Star Trek. But can you expound on that a little?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like for myself, I do, because I am a huge lover of the image websites like Pixabay and the others. And I tend to go browse them and spend way too much time on them. Mm-hmm. And I do things like put together slideshows that are about the world that I write in and things like that. And I share those with my readers. And if I have, images, for example, on that really kind of incorporate one of the characters. I'll share those kind of things. I share like glimpses into, the writer life, what I'm doing on any particular day, because I think a lot of readers who also are not writers, but just the pure readers, have a lot of misconceptions about what we as writers do. Mm-hmm. Some of them have a very glamorized life of what we actually do, when most of the time I think we're beating our foreheads against the keyboard. So, I like to kind of put that part of it in there as well. I want people to be able to connect with me as a real person, mm-hmm. Not just as Morgan Shaw persona, even though that's very much also who I am. Mm-hmm. But things like that. Of course, easy stuff. Like if I'm running a promotion on one of my books, I stick that on there. If, quizzes and little fun stuff, like you can find all these little quizzes on mm-hmm. BuzzFeed or whatever. I do fun little things like that. And the nice part is you can use that same thing across your social media from your website, so that you're being active in all of those different places at once. Mm-hmm. So it's really just a matter of kind of inviting in. It's kind of like, inviting your friend in for a cup of tea and just kind of sit down and shoot the breeze, and what comes out comes out. And it's really a connection. Mm-hmm. So for me, it's sharing books. I share quotes from the books. From the Morgan Shaw perspective, I actually have a section on my website that is just for readers who've signed up for my newsletter. And they get private access to this one whole section of the website that is just journal writings from the characters. Yeah. And no one else has access to those. Those are not public. So, and they're not in any of the books. So it's kind of extra content and stuff like that. And it sounds like extra work, but it actually isn't, because a lot of those happened when I was trying to learn my characters' voices, mm-hmm. free writing and stuff. So it wasn't even like that was even a lot of extra work. But things that you can do to make your readers feel included, especially if there's anything exclusive like that you can give to just your, some of your readers that have signed up for your newsletter and such. Yeah. They love that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Okay. So I think it's important to point out that, one, you're really comfy with the tech. So that allows, mm-hmm. So everybody, if you're not like, what can I put on my website? And then, blurting out like 5 minutes of things that you could do. Because I think there's a mindset around technology that keeps people from being able to be creative around it because they don't know how to do it. But yes. If you bypass that, you can listen to Stacy and how she's got all of these ideas for things to put on her website that are, she's like, you could do this. And there's things that you would probably also like. I love the idea. And even if you're not writing fantasy, I love the idea of going and finding, on like Pixabay or whatever, like these images, these Creative Commons images. You guys make sure you have the rights to use them, but finding images to share with the readers, because this is the thing that the website gives you the opportunity to do, is to share with your readers what you are creating before it's even done. So you're like, I found this image of an Irish cottage. This is the Irish cottage that I'm using in the setting of my historical romance, and they get to see what you're doing to create before the book is even complete. And you had just a whole list of those things. So that was really, and so let's talk a little bit about, because we've talked about it, about building your website around your worlds. So what do you think are some of like the core must-have things that people should have on their websites? And let's just start there.
Okay. Well, obviously, from a tech side of it, I guess, you're definitely going to want your basic pages, your home page, your About Me page, your contact page. You definitely want a contact page. And a lot of people I've found in my experience, especially since I've started really working with a lot of authors, a lot of them are kind of scared of the contact page. I think there's some hesitation with that. And basically, I've had to, reassure some people that, hey, you're not just sticking your email address out there for mm-hmm. for anybody out in the internet world and on the interwebs to grab and start using. But also, on the rare, very, very extraordinarily rare occasion that you would get an email that might be, something you wouldn't want, well, there's no law saying you have to respond to it. So, and that was that was actually an odd thing for me from the tech side coming into that work, because that's not something, that was not a hesitation or a resistance that I had ever experienced, just because, like I said, I am coming from the tech background. But it's been super interesting and really enlightening and for me to learn how people view it from the other side.
So a contact page is, to be clear, contact page is where there's a form that people can fill out. And it's like, they know it gets to you, but they don't know how.
Exactly. Yes.
So they're like, I know it's going to you, but they don't know how it gets to you. So it's blind on their side. They just have a thanks for submitting your form. You get it as an email, but they don't see that. So yeah. I think, tell me what you think about this. I think a lot of people, because they have this, and we've talked about this, the two of us ourselves, about upper limit problems and how we create, we create our additional problems or issues or sabotage ourselves in some way because we don't want to have to take that next step forward. Do you think that people around their web use the technology around websites and the fear of use that to keep themselves from moving forward in their author journey?
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. Yes, yes, and yes. Because that is a very, very easy one to use, because everybody knows they need a website. Everybody knows they are supposed to have a website. Everybody wants a website, but then they're like, well, I don't know how, so I don't have to. Or it's way, way too expensive and I don't have the money for it. I don't have the time to learn it, et cetera, et cetera. So there's always, the website is one of the easiest excuses I have seen people use to not move forward with it. And then when and this is going to sound odd coming from a techie person, but I've actually said to somebody, well, what does that have to do with writing your book? I mean, I'm all about the websites, believe me, but that really at the end of the day doesn't have any, get your book done. Your website needs to happen. Absolutely. But that is not the barrier to getting your book done. Definitely not the barrier. So yeah, I think people do use that as an excuse. But the thing is you made a really excellent point that because there's tech involved, it's like somehow the creative part of the brain kind of shuts down and they try to move into that logical, analytical part of the brain. So they don't have the ideas of what their website should do or what it should have. And it becomes not fun at that point, and they think it becomes not creative because it's tech. And that's really not the case. I mean, if you approach your website from that same perspective of approaching your novel, it becomes a whole other adventure. It's really fun at that point, especially if you have someone that can, kind of hold your hand and walk you through how to do all the tech part that you're not sure about. Because at that point, you're world building. And that's what we do as writers. We world build. And that's true whether you're in fantasy or modern romance. You're still building in a world. So, and that's how I like to approach a website.
Oh my gosh.
Go ahead. Oh, no. That was it. I could rant today.
I just had an epiphany, Stacy. Because, I coach a lot of authors and when they're making their book covers, I'm like, your book cover is not a visual representation of your book. It's of the story. It's not a visual representation of the story. It's a marketing tool 100%. It's not supposed to look like your real character. It can. If you have a person on the front of your book cover, it can look like the character, but it doesn't have to. It mostly just has to get people to click. Like, that's what the 100% reason you have a book cover is, to get people to pick up the book and read the description. But if you do want to build the images around your world and the characters, et cetera, and you need a space for that, your website, not your book cover, but your website is an amazing place to do that.
Absolutely. Because that's the thing. That's the one place where you have complete and total creative freedom to do whatever you want with it around your and your characters. You know, I remember you coaching me about the book cover thing and how it's not about me.
I remember that too.
And it's absolutely true. You know, my book covers were better for it because, you know, my original book covers were about, you know, what I wanted and about the story, which really didn't work. But yeah, the website's exactly the same way. I mean, people need to, if they can try to approach it as another world building thing where they're not constrained as much by the whole marketing selling part of it, then yeah, it becomes a whole adventure and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. That was an epiphany for me. So now every time somebody's like, put my book cover, I mean, like, put that creativity in your website.
Absolutely.
You can still do that. Just put it on your website.
Yep.
So let's walk through the experience of a reader who is maybe, let's say they find finished reading your book. They really liked it. They're like, I am curious about more. I want to know more about Morgan. So then at the end of your book, you have an invitation to your newsletter / website. Okay. What is the pathway that you see these readers following? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, absolutely. What I've seen, and it's kind of 50-50 how I've seen people do it. I've seen a lot of authors that will just put their base website address in there. That gets, you know, someone to the homepage. And I do that as well. But on those invitation pages inside my book, I actually take them to a very specific page on my website, which is, it's called Join the Resistance. But it's based around the characters in my book. And one of the big characters, who's actually a fox, is basically inviting them to join the resistance, i.e. join the newsletter. And there's an actual kind of handwritten parchment that the reader receives as soon as they get on that page that's inviting them and telling them why it's important to join. And of course, from there, you know, they can still see all the website and go anywhere they want. But for me, that's how I did it. I wanted to bring them in and make it feel very exclusive, make it feel very personal to them, you know, as if I'm speaking directly to them rather than just saying, here's my website, go look at it, you know. And of course, it seems to convert pretty well. when I get people in there that come in there from the book, especially, it does seem to work really well because they're like, oh yeah, I remember Chase from the book. Okay, here he is. He's cute. You know, and then and then they go from there. So that has been one of the biggest ways that I've used that is, and it comes back to really a lot of what you've taught me about marketing is all of it is about marketing. Instead of looking at all of it through rose-colored glasses, you need to look at it through marketing-colored glasses, you know, and it's really about trying to be able to connect with your readers in a way that you'll be able to connect with them again in the future. Now, that's a big part of it. So for me, it's not just about, hey, come look at my pretty website. It's about, hey, come look at my pretty website, but stay in contact with me. Let me know how I can reach you and what I can give back to you. How can I help you? You know, that sort of thing, and kind of make them feel included in the world that I've been trying to build.
Oh man, Stacy, you're so great.
I learned you.
You don't have to credit me for all the things, even though yes, but so that's there's some important things there. I think that when somebody likes your book enough that they want more, I think it's really important to have that more. Like if you don't, like whether it's a newsletter or your website or both, ideally. But if they're like, oh man, I don't want this story to end. Because a lot of us, let's be real, a lot of us don't want the story to end. We just want to keep on with those characters that we've fallen in love with. And having your website and your newsletter, well, here's the thing. Your website allows, having a place to take them, aka your website, allows them to stay in that world a little bit longer, especially if you've built the website around the world. And then what you want to do in a very natural way is say, hey, if you've enjoyed that world and you want to know more about future worlds or similar worlds or worlds that are coming up, then you can invite them to join your newsletter, to subscribe to your newsletter. So that way they can continue to participate in the worlds that you're creating. and not in a way like I'm going to try and sell to you, but like, hey, if you like this, you can have more.
Yep. And that was my thinking with the whole having the private journal entries to give people who actually really enjoyed those characters more of a glimpse into, what those characters' lives are like as they go through the story. Because a lot of the journal entries actually touch on points. They happen at specific points throughout the story, throughout the books. So it actually gives people a different perspective on what happened in chapter 3. Oh my gosh, that's what they thought about it. Wow. I didn't think about that. That sort of thing. And it gives it from, multiple characters' perspectives.
Yeah,
too.
I love those. I will join newsletters just to get the POVs from other. I'm like, ooh, because sometimes some authors will write the same scene that you've read in the book, but from a different POV. And I'm like,
yep.
Oh, what was that person thinking during that time?
Yeah, I do
too. So that's a really good opt-in, you guys. And an opt-in is if you have somebody you want to invite into your newsletter, you can say, hey, join the newsletter, join the resistance, and find out some of these, exclusive things like POVs, the only people who get my newsletter. Okay. So we've talked a lot about websites. We haven't talked about the technology part. So let's just briefly, because I don't want to get into it because the people are going to, it's not fun to listen to when you're not passionate about it.
No, it's really not. It gets kind of dry and boring real quick.
But can we talk about the 3 different kinds, the 3 main ways that people can do a website? And we're not talking about writing your own HTML code. We're talking about the 3 different ways that people can, 3 basic ways.
Yes. Yes, we won't get into any deep programming discussions there. Actually there's, especially nowadays, there's so many different options that people have for building websites. I mean, my personal favorite is WordPress, of course. And you have, a couple different options within WordPress. You could do your own self-hosted WordPress, which is usually what I recommend people do. And that's basically, it sounds complicated, but it's not. It's basically where, you go buy your own domain name, myauthorname.com. And then you choose a company that you're going to have it hosted with. And that could be, GoDaddy, where you bought your domain name, or some other company. And that's why it's called self-hosted. And then, it sounds really complicated, but it really isn't. And then you build your WordPress website from there. And because you're doing it yourself and it's not restricted by another company's restrictions, you pretty much have free reign over what all you can do with it as far as all the plugins and different things with WordPress. Now, one of the other options, and a lot of people will go this option as well, is doing something like a kind of a prepackaged web builder. Like, the Wix or the Squares, stuff like that. And those are really good to get a website up and running quickly. Of course, they don't require much in the way of tech knowledge. It's kind of a drag and drop sort of thing. Which you do have the drag and drop now with coming with WordPress now too. So that's a beautiful thing. It's beautiful, I gotta say. And then, of course, so that's an option. And then, of course, hiring a web professional to build it for you is always an option as well. And if you have the budget to do it, that's something I highly recommend. Because, like we talked about before, it makes more sense for writers to be writing rather than to be trying to learn tech that they really don't care about anyway. So that's something, if someone has the budget to do it, and a lot of times the budget, when I say that scares people off. Because people think, oh my God, build a website, that's going to cost me thousands of dollars. And it really doesn't. It's much, much, much less expensive than what most people think. So even if people aren't sure if they have the budget for it, I recommend that they contact some people and find out. Because, you don't know until you know.
Contact some people.
And you don't know until you ask.
Wink.
Yes. Contact someone that is, has 20 years of web experience.
And is also an indie author. No, I do want to, so I just want to go over, because you were so adorable. It's clear, you're like, it's no big deal. And I just want to clarify some things for people who are just barely thinking about this. So WordPress is like the Microsoft Word of websites. Kind of. So everything is taken care, like you don't have to figure out how to bold or highlight or things on the coding side. You just press bold and Word takes care of it. Well, WordPress does that essentially kind of for websites. So once you get everything set up, then you just have to type into it and press published and things are up and going. So that's kind of what that is. But there is an initial setup that can be a little bit overwhelming for people, even though it's not that difficult, but it's mentally, it can be overwhelming. That's what when you get the prepackaged like Wix or Squarespace, they don't, you kind of bypass the overwhelming setup part because it's easier on that side, but it has slightly less functionality in the long run, and it can be a little bit more expensive. And none of these are hugely expensive. Like you'd be surprised how reasonable it is. And then the third option, and I'd like to say the third option with the hiring a professional, there's two different ways that you can go with it. So you can have somebody hire to get to do the setup on like a WordPress site. So you don't have to do the website part, the setup part, but you still have the functionality, and then they can take care of it. Or you can take care of it after that setup part is taken care of, or you can hire somebody to just do it for you. The handy thing about, or maybe some kind of combo in between that you set up with your person. But the handy thing about having access to your own website is if you want to make a change, you just can.
Yeah.
You don't have to hire somebody and pay money every time you're like, well, I'm doing a 99-cent deal. I want to change it on my website. You just go and change it to 99 cents instead of reaching out to somebody saying, hey, can you change this to 99 cents? And then paying them to change it to 99 cents for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So those are kind of the three options. We deep dive into them in the Build Your Author Website book. And so I just want to mention that because, so whether you want, whichever option you want to go with, if you build your own, I recommend going through the Build Your Author Website book because it gives you what you need to know. I feel like, I don't know, Stacy, did you ever have this happen where you had an issue with your car? You guys, I'm laughing especially hard because I just remembered that Stacy does have an issue with her car right now. But when you take it in and I've taken mine in and I have no idea. And I'm like, I just took it in for an oil change. And then they come back with like three sheets of paper with, and you need this and this and this and this and this. And I'm like, I have no idea whether I actually need that or I don't need that. Like, I just feel like I know that they're putting things on there that I don't actually need right now.
Oh yeah. They could be selling you like, I don't know, funky widgets that don't even exist, but you don't know.
Yeah. Yes. And so what I like about, and so I always kind of wanted to take like a mechanics 101 just so I'd be like, I know I don't need that.
Yes.
Quit trying to sell me stuff I don't need. But I feel like the Build Your Author Website book is that. It's like, it's Build Your Website 101, so that when you go to people and you actually do start the process of building your website, you already have the basics so you don't get scammed.
Love that analogy. Yes, that is a great analogy for it. And that's true even if, whether you'd go on with something like a Wix or something like a WordPress, or especially even if you're hiring a professional to do it. Because, if you're hiring a professional to build you a WordPress website, for example, it's a really good idea to have at least a basic understanding of what they're doing so that they're not going to take advantage of you.
Yeah.
It's a really important thing.
Like if you want to change your own oil or you want to change your own air filter, you'll know how to do it after reading the book, or you can hire somebody to do it, but you know what's involved. Like I remember when I learned to change my own air filter in my car and I was like, really? That's it? Yes. I was like, that's it? Are you kidding me? They've been charging me this much to just pull my glove box out and put a new filter in and then put the glove packs back in? Like it was like insane. And that's what I feel like our Build Your Author website book does. Anyways, okay. I don't want to be too salesy, but it's really exciting. Like we're both passionate about this topic. So it's kind of, you know what I mean? It's kind of like, websites, build your worlds, free images. Okay. I know. Gosh, it's so fun. So what we haven't talked about, so let's kind of, I don't know. Okay. We're going to leave the website stuff because I think we've talked about that quite a bit, but I want to get a little bit back into mindset and around being an indie author as a career. And it includes websites, but so how do you stay motivated around this career of being an indie author? And that it can include your website stuff, but how do you stay motivated for that?
Whew. Lots and lots of coffee. Lots of coffee. Well, I mean, I'm a single mom, so a lot of times, motivation, it's not really a separate part of the equation for me. And as any single parent can attest, you just do what has to be done. And a lot of that is, it kind of rolls back around to mindset. I mean, it's a commitment. Okay. It's once you commit to doing something, and whether that commitment is losing weight, or whether it's, saving money, or whether it's stopping smoking, or whatever it might be. Once you have that mental, you flip that switch in your mind, okay, and you actually make the commitment. I smoked, oh gosh, I hate to admit it, but I used to smoke. I smoked for 16 years before I quit. And I knew all 16 years that I needed to quit smoking. I knew that it was horrible for me and everybody else around me, but I still couldn't quit until I flipped that switch in my head. Then it was simple. As soon as I made that mindset switch, it was easy to actually quit, which was crazy considering how addicted I was to cigarettes before that. And the motivation is kind of the same thing. Once you commit yourself to doing something, it kind of becomes a no-brainer in a way, for me at least. It's just like, okay, well, I felt absolutely terrible today, but I might not be able to, as my son likes to say, word good today. Because I was sick with the flu, and putting two words together that made sense was pretty much impossible. But even on the days when I don't feel like I can string a sentence together, I still do something to move my author business forward, because it's an author business. It's not just me, frolicking in the flowers, writing words. I wish it was that. It would be awesome. But, being an author is a business, and you have to treat it that way. So even on the days when I just don't have it, I just can't drag myself to the keyboard to write 1,000 words or whatever, there's still always something I can be doing in my business to get my author business moving forward. And whether that is writing, whether that is doing some marketing, whether it's working on my next newsletter, or, helping another author with their website or formatting or whatever, there's something always that I can be doing in my business. And for me, that has been the easiest way to stay motivated, because there's always something to be done. It's usually never the same thing twice. Mm-hmm. It's always something kind of fresh. And I know that if I want to get from where I'm at to the point that I want to get to, these things have to happen, and no one else is going to do it for me. So yeah, it's a lot of that and a lot of coffee. I have to say, probably the one of the things that I haven't mentioned on that yet is having, I don't have a tribe personally, like family, friends kind of thing, that really support what I decided to do. Most people that I knew in my quote unquote real life, thought I was completely mental for leaving tech and going this route, and still do to some extent. Mm-hmm. But having a tribe of other authors, really of other indie authors, folks like in the Academy and different people that I've met through this journey, has just been game changing. It really, really has. People that are kind of on that same wavelength and that same kind of journey that you're on with it. Absolutely, absolutely critical.
There's a couple of things that I just want to touch on and emphasize. And I know I've mentioned this before, but you never know who's listened to all the interviews or who's just starting out now. So I have to keep mentioning it. The difference between, so when you say you made that commitment, so there's a difference. It's between the 100% and 99%. Okay. So you might think, oh, there's only 1% difference between 99% and 100%. But the difference is that when it ends up in reality, it's a much, much bigger, like, energetic difference, because when you've committed to something 100%, you're not asking, will I do this thing today? You're asking, how will this thing get done today?
Yes, exactly.
Whereas when you do 99%, right? Sorry.
Oh, no. You're right. That last 1% is almost as big as the entire 99% before it.
Because when you when you do 99%, then all of a sudden the question becomes, will I do this today or not? And instead of the question being, how does this happen? It's, will it even happen? And that is a huge difference to ask yourself every morning when you're getting ready for your day. It's the difference between it happening and not happening. It's the difference between professional and hobbyist. It's the difference between, I'm constantly wondering, because I think this is a big, it's not something that's visible to the outside world, but and maybe you can answer it, maybe you can't, but I'm going to ask, is there a story or a trigger or something that happened around making that commitment?
Oh, absolutely.
Like, can you tell us, because I think that's the thing that most people are like, well, how does that happen? That moment is the one that I really want. It's so hard. It's different for everybody, but I think it's helpful to know. So do you have?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's, and it starts out as a very not happy story, but it's so far has had a really great happy ending.
Are you willing to share?
Okay. Oh, absolutely. Okay. Yeah. Because it's something that I've been, it's one of those things where eventually it's going to make its way into a book. It has already started, but that book is still a ways off. But I mean, several years back, and I had mentioned, I had some health issues. Several years back, I was working for a worldwide corporation that is in many, many, many homes. And probably a lot of our listeners have some of these devices in their homes right now. But I was working for a very large corporation and was actually in the top 2% of the company for what I did, and ended up losing that job because of the time I was having to take off for doctors and different things for my health. And it was a huge blow because as I also mentioned, I was a single mom. And most people, I think in America, I think the percentage is something like 80% now that live paycheck to paycheck. I was one of those. And very, very quickly, because I also live in West Virginia, which is an economically depressed state. So you kind of had this whole perfect storm thing that was happening with all the doctor's appointments and the economically depressed times. In an economically depressed state, I wasn't able to get another job. And within a few months, I ended up losing my car. I ended up losing my house. I was about 2 weeks away from being homeless, actually. And during all of this whole big transition was when I had that mindset that, you know what? And I was really starting to examine some things in my life. And I was like, you know what? If I'm going to have this level of stress and I'm going to be putting in this many hours every day anyway, that is honestly making my health problems worse, I'm at least going to be doing that for something I love. And when I had that thought and that thought occurred to me, my first initial reaction was like, okay, Stace, that's kind of stupid. I'll be honest. That was my first immediate gut reaction to it, only because, let's just face it. I mean, most people believe being a writer is not practical. It's not, that real job. So that was my immediate reaction to it, but the thought would not go away. It would not go away. And the more I thought about it, I'm like, okay, that's what I need to be doing. Because I'm 100% a wholehearted believer that every single person on this planet is here for a specific reason. And I do believe that this is part of mine. And once that I did a lot of soul searching and stuff on it. But once I got to that realization, it was just like, okay, this is what I'm doing. And as soon as I said that, as soon as that commitment was made, as soon as I went from that 99% to the 100%, it was like I wasn't stressed. With everything that was going on at the time, which was crazy, it was just like stress just kind of melted away. And it was like I got this super clear focus of, okay, I've made a decision. The decision's made. This is what's happening. And it was just like, okay, here's my path forward. Let's get this done. Let's do this thing, And it kept me from falling into what would have been an extraordinarily deep depression, I'm sure. But so it wasn't a, like I've said before, it wasn't a frolicking through the flowers kind of thing that made me make that commitment. It was a fairly traumatic thing, but my gosh, it was the best decision I've ever made. Absolutely.
Okay. I think that's really powerful. And thank you so much for sharing, because I have those moments. I think a lot of us have those moments, and they might not be around writing, but I think a lot of us have had a moment like that in our life. And they're very powerful. And thank you for the difference between 99% and 100% and that commitment. I think they're never an easy.
No, I don't think it can be.
No,
I don't think it can be an easy thing, because making that 100% commitment is not an easy thing. And actually sticking with that and having that level of commitment on a daily basis is not an easy thing at all. Even if it's something you love doing, it's still not an easy thing to do.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So thank you so much, Stacy. Can you tell us, so you write, obviously we've talked about our website book. So you guys, Build Your Author Website by Stacy Sowers and Ella Barnard. Check it out if you want to build a website. But Stacy also writes under her pen name, Morgan Shaw. And so can you tell us about your latest? And she loves fantasy. She's a little bit geeky. You can find. So tell us a little bit about your books under your pen name and where people can find you for both.
Yeah, I do. I'm a huge geek. I'm well beyond a little bit geeky, I think. But yeah, I love fantasy. Always have. In fact, these stories, it's the Adorman Chronicles, and I'm getting ready to release book 4 actually here in about a week and a half. Yay! And also have a novella, which is a companion series of novellas that go along with it. So it's a whole other series, but those are just kind of standalone novellas that focus on individual characters. But it's the Adorman Chronicles. And of course, anybody can find out more information at morriganshaw.com. But those stories actually originated from my son. When he was younger, he's 13 now, but when he was younger, we used to just on the fly make up stories. And it was kind of this one big, long, huge story that just kind of went on and on for like a year as we would tell it to each other in little bits. And then when I made the decision to start writing, he was like, oh, you should write down those stories. And I was like, yeah. Yeah, I should.
That is the sweetest thing ever. You never told me that.
Yeah, that's where that inspiration started from. Kind of grew from there.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
And so book 4 is getting ready to come out. And so far, right now, as it stands, it's going to be a 9 or 10 book series.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you want to find out more about that series, the Adorman Chronicles, did I say that right?
Adorman. Or
okay.
Adorman. Either way. I've heard it pronounced both, actually. So most of the readers actually pronounce it Adorman.
Oh, okay. Okay. So it's Morgan Shaw, M-O-R, just one R, you guys, MORIGANSHAW.com. And I will have this in the show notes. And then if people want to find out about your website services and your other technology-based services, where can they find you?
Yes, they could actually hit me up over on authorsmojo.com. And that's just AUTHORS Mojo, MOJO.com.
Yep. And I highly recommend that you check that out because Stacy is very experienced and very reasonably priced. Like if I'd known about her or if I didn't have any experience, I would absolutely be going to her. So, plus I've worked with her myself and she's very professional. Live testimonial, Stacy. I don't want to get too salesy. So you guys, thank you so much for listening. I hope this was helpful for you. Stacy, thank you so much for being here and sharing your experiences with us.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.
I think so too, but then we're talking about subjects that we both love. So
yes, exactly.
Hopefully it was fun for everybody else as it was for us.
Exactly.
Thank you all for being here. Hugs and happy authoring here at Author Like a Boss. Hey boss, you made it to the end of the episode. You're the best. Because of that, I'm going to give you a special invitation to find out more about the Author Boss Academy, where I and a bunch of really awesome authors hang out, have fun, and get stuff done. If you end up joining, tell me the secret word and you'll get a special bonus. Find out more about the Academy at authorlikeaboss.com/academy. The secret word is nipples. Hugs and happy authoring. I hope to see you soon.
If you love the Author Like a Boss podcast, we'd love for you to subscribe, rate, and give a review on iTunes. Until next time.